Hello, everybody. I want to talk to you today about a subject that's very close to all of us, and that is debt and owing. You probably have debts. You probably have credit card debts, and car debts, and mortgages, and student loans, and business loans. We live in a culture that affirms debt as a way of life. Most people owe something, and a lot of people owe a lot. The United States has a national debt at the moment of $26.5 trillion. And if you want to see an interesting website, go to National Debt Counter, and you'll see tick, 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 thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars every second adding to the national debt. It's crazy, isn't it? So what I want to talk to you today about is the nature of debt, owing, and why we believe we owe, and why a sense of owing is unnatural and debilitating, and most important, how to get out of it. So in these 20 minutes or so, I'm going to give you some keys, at least 5 keys that will help you, first of all, get out of a debt mentality, and then get out of a debt situation. How practical is that for free? And so what I just said is really a key to how this game works. We're talking about a debt mentality. Now, if you've watched these videos before, you know that prosperity and abundance is not a number in your bank account or the number of square feet in your house, but it's really a state of mind. We all know people who are very wealthy, but they feel poor. And we know people who don't have a lot of money, but they feel rich. So it's really how you're thinking about stuff that determines your experience. So we want to look at as the consciousness of owing, which, as I said earlier, is unnatural. I want to suggest that owing is a form of a gap. We've said many times in our videos that there is no gap, that in reality there's only wholeness and oneness. And anytime you perceive a gap, saying, this is where I am, and this is where I need to be, and there's a gap in between, I need to lose weight, I need to find a mate, I need to have children, I need to get divorced, and then I'll be okay. That is a game of the ego, which says that there's something missing. And if you believe in debt, what you're saying is there is something missing. I have to pay off a certain amount of money or do something before I can be solvent. So I want to suggest that that gap is a fake. That gap is fiction. That gap is a lie. That gap is illusion. There is no gap between where you stand and where I stand and being solvent. Now you can do all kinds of dances to make more money to pay off your debt. But unless you know that you're already whole, you will keep having debts. The analogy is a guy walking down the street and he has a hole in his pocket and change keeps falling out of the hole. And so what does he do? He goes out and gets another job to replace the change that's falling out of his pocket, but that's not going to do any good because the same hole is going to lose the same change. What he needs to do is sew the hole so he can put more change in and it won't fall out. So the hole in our consciousness is a belief that I owe. I owe, I owe, I owe. So a bumper sticker, I owe, it's off to work, I go. And so I want to hit this head on today. I want to be really direct about this and just pull the rug out from under the thought that I owe. Now, nobody owes anything. You can owe stuff in the world of illusion, but not in the world of truth. And there's a wonderful quote from the Sufi poet Hafiz, who said, even after all this time, the sun never says to the earth, you owe me. Look what happens with a love like that. It lights up the whole sky. So let's make a critical shift here, that God doesn't owe, and neither do you. And because you are an expression of the divine, everything God is, you are, and everything God is not, you are not. Only the traits and experience of God truly belong to you. This is a fundamental route to healing. It's the only route to healing. As long as you identify with your human traits and problems, you're going to keep them. But when you start to really expand your mind and really get that everything God is, I am, everything God is not, if God doesn't owe, then neither do I. This is it's a critical, crucial shift. It's a paradigm transformation that we're looking for here. It will not work unless you do this in some form or fashion. Now, you could owe on paper. We're going to come to that in a minute, but it doesn't mean you owe spiritually. Now, I'm going to do a little fun thing with you today. So the ego is the part of our mind that creates gaps. If you're a Course in Miracles student, you know that ego is the source of all of our upset because it says you are smaller than you are lesser than you are. And so it's always looking for some way to create a gap, an owingness, if you will. So let me show you something funny today. I actually dug up my high school yearbook. You can't really see it clearly, but this is the last page of the yearbook. And what happened in my high school was, at those days in New Jersey, the senior class every year would take a trip to Washington, D.C. That was their big hoo-ha for the year. And they would take the photo of the senior class, and then they put it in the yearbook, and it would be there for posterity. So I wasn't in this. I didn't go, but all my friends did. So I'm going to show you something. You can't really see it, but I'm just giving you the idea. So there are two guys standing on this end of the bleachers, Arnie Goldstein and Randy Meltzer, two of my buddies. Okay, now, when the yearbook came out, a friend of mine said, "Do you notice anything unusual about this picture, Alan?" I said, "No, not really." And they said, "Well, look who's standing at the upper two places in the bleachers." And I said, "Well, there's Randy and there's Arnie." Okay, now take a look of who's standing on the farthest side of the bleachers. Well, there's Randy and there's Arnie again, the same two guys. Randy and Arnie, Randy and Arnie. I don't know if you can see it clearly, but just take my word for it. It's Randy and Arnie. And he said, "Well, how do they do that? Did they bilocate? Are they spiritual masters?" Far from it. And so he said what happened was, in those days, the way they did that picture was they had a wide-angle camera, and the camera would start on this side, and it would kind of pan down very slowly and take, until we got the whole class in. So these guys, Randy and Arnie, heard about this trick. So what they did was they jumped down on the bleacher after the camera passed them. They jumped down, they ran behind the bleachers, and then they jumped up again on the end of the bleachers, and there they were again. This is the same people in the same picture for the second time. So what does this have to do with our lesson today? Well, this is how the ego works. If the ego cannot get your attention and create a gap in one area, it'll jump down and create a gap in another area. In other words, it's very sneaky, it's insidious, and it's very clever. And so it's always seeking to find some new gap. So let's say you have an argument with your husband and you solve it. Okay, fine. Then you have an argument with your boss. Or let's say you pay off one debt, another debt pops up. Let's say that you lose some weight, but then you find more wrinkles. You get the idea. The ego is always looking for something to create some gap or some indebtedness. So we're equating today ego with gap and ego with indebtedness. So what we want to do is a global scan And we want to pull the rug out from the sense of gap and owing at the root, not at the manifestation. Now, you can take all kinds of financial investment courses, and they can learn to buy gold and stocks and all that kind of stuff. But I can promise you one thing. No matter how cleverly you invest your money, as long as you hold some sense of owingness, it's never going to work. Thoreau said, for every 1,000 people hacking at the branches of evil, there is one striking at the root. So everybody's trying to manipulate everything out there, but very few people are looking in here for the root of what's being created out there. Now, conversely, if you have a good prosperity consciousness, you can invest all kinds of money, do all kinds of stock market strategies, and they're going to work. Why? Because you're coming from prosperity. If you think, I'm poor and I'm going to get rich in the stock market, you're going to stay poor because you're coming from a poor mentality. If you think, I'm solvent and I'm whole, and wouldn't it be fun to make some more money, then you're going to make money because you're coming from enoughness. Got it? So let me give you 5 tips that I've come up with from my own experience about ending debt. Okay, this is good. This is really going to help you guys. Okay, first of all, affirm solvency by identifying with the divine. Got it? So this is why the title of today's lecture is God doesn't owe and neither do I. Because what it's saying is, if I am one with the divine and God doesn't owe, then I can't owe either. And so if you don't want to, use divine, that's fine. Divine's fine without you. You can say, I am solvent, I am whole, I am prosperous, I am enough, I do wonderful things with my money and it comes back to me. I can't possibly owe, but I like the one identifying with the divine because that's taking me out of the human and into the spiritual. And it's only in the human where gaps and ego and debts exist. In the spiritual, there's no such thing as debt. There is no such thing as debt in the mind of God. God never heard of debt. God doesn't have any debts. God doesn't recognize any debts. Debt is a false illusion. It's a false idea that people made up in the world that keeps us small. So you got to get the idea of debt out of your mind. Just banish it. Next, number 2. I want to suggest you remove statements of owing from your vocabulary. So don't, oh man, this mortgage bill came in. Oh man, this credit card bill came in. Look at that. Oh, yeah. So get out of saying owing statements of any kind. Now, we're extrapolating this whole lecture today, not just to money, but to all forms of owing. All forms of owing. Now, we're going to come back to this in a few moments. But anytime you believe you owe society a debt, you owe a person a debt, you owe a religion a debt, you owe God a debt, you are affirming owingness. We want to strike at the root of all debts today, not just financial debt, and reel in those thoughts that think, I owe this person, that person, not just financially, but socially. I owe them a favor. I owe them an errand. You got the idea? We're going to come back to that in a moment. So don't talk about your owingness. Anytime you start to say, I owe this, just zip your lip and don't go there. You're going to dig your trench deeper by talking or complaining about how much you owe. Next, number 3, begin to thank the people you pay, like your creditors. This is a big one. Now, I used to really get upset every time my credit card statement came in every month because I always thought I never expected it would be that much. I couldn't remember all those things I used my credit card for, but then the statement comes, oh my God, I had no idea. So I would kind of grumble. And so I enter my payments in my online account so I can keep track for my taxes. And so I'd be entering, I paid this guy, paid that guy, paid that guy. Oh man, and I would just grumble through it. And by the time I was done entering my credit card statement into my computer, I'd be pissed off and bummed out, and it was no fun. I thought, well, is there another way to look at this? Well, yeah, these people didn't charge you just for nothing. They actually did something for you. Oh, really? Well, United Airlines flew you back and forth to Japan from Hawaii for like $1,100. Well, that's pretty cool. So I didn't have to row a boat. I didn't have to get on a steamship. I didn't have to swim. I sat on a plane for about 8 hours and I landed in Japan. They got me home safely. Well, is that worth $1,100? Hell yeah. Well, look at the bill for my health food store. Oh man, that's really expensive compared to Foodland. Well, you got good food, Alan. You're eating well. Your partner's eating well. Your dogs are eating well. So you paid a little more. Someone said you can either pay the health food store now or your doctor later. So I'm investing in my health by buying good. Well, thank you, health food store. You got me organic food. You got me soy stuff and vegetarian stuff and all kinds of stuff and raisins and good treats that I like. I just go down to the store. It's 20 minutes away. I pick it up and come. Wow, you're eating really well. Thank you, God, for that health food store. Thank you, health foods. Not done. If you're not done at health food, that's fine too. Thank you, Foodland. Thank you, anybody. Thank you, any grocery store. I'm getting fed. I'm exchanging some money, and I'm being sustained by the love of God through that particular store vendor. Well, thank you. That's really cool. Well, back to my mortgage. That's a lot of money, a couple thousand a month. Well, I have a nice house. I enjoy my home. You loaned me a bunch of money so I can live in my home before I had the money to pay for it. So I'm paying you some interest. Fine. But you, big bank, that a lot of people complain about, you loan me some money and I have a nice house for my family. Thank you, God. Thank you, mortgage company. Thank you, the person who arranged the mortgage, blah, 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 blah. This is a good thing. So my credit card statement, which used to be a source of angst and upset, is now a source of celebration. Well, all these people help me. Sure, I don't mind paying you. You help me. Now I'm going to help you. I'm going to help you have a house, people who work for the mortgage company. So you see how the game works. It's good stuff, isn't it? Okay, next. This is a practical idea. Pay down your smaller debts. So let's say you got 5 debts. You got a credit card debt. You got we bought a lawnmower, a big lawnmower for our rural area. I don't know. So take the smallest one and pay that down first. Why? Because in the experience of paying down a small debt, you're gaining a sense of solvency. You're getting the experience of I am now debt free. Maybe you have 3 or 4 other debts, but when you pay the smallest one down first, it's like, oh yeah, I can do this. I can pay a debt down. And you're sending a message to your subconscious mind, which creates your experience more than your conscious mind, that, hey, that's a debt paid down. How cool is that? And if you can't pay it all down, pay something down. In other words, get into the core of your consciousness that, well, I don't have to have these big debts. I can pay some of them down. Hey, I'm making progress here. Hey, I'm not going to be in debt for the rest of my life. This is cool. So see, everything I'm saying today is geared at shifting your mind, inverting your consciousness from an owing mentality to a solvency mentality. Everything I'm saying is all coming from the same direction, all heading the same direction. Understand? Finally, the last one, which could in some ways be the most important, is release others from the thought that they owe you. Now, we're not talking here financially so much as spiritually. You understand? Because anytime you hold somebody else in a sense of owingness, you bind yourself to a sense of owingness. Are you with me on this? Now, this goes way back to Jesus. Jesus said, judge not that you be not judged. Well, he wasn't just giving a religious commandment. He was saying that when you go into judgment of somebody else, so in that moment, you become liable and vulnerable to judgment to yourself. You cannot judge somebody else without being judgeable yourself. It's impossible. This is a psychological law. You cannot judge somebody and be unjudgeable yourself. On the converse, you cannot forgive somebody without being forgiven yourself. So the key to all healing is to give others what you would give yourself. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Well, releasing others from debt releases you from debt. Now, I'm not saying if somebody owes you money, you shouldn't ask you to pay them back. That's just fine. But we're talking more about owing favors. I knew a guy who he did a lot of favors for people. But then if they didn't do a favor back for him, he would get angry at them. Hey, I went over and I helped you trim your yard, and then I asked you for this, you couldn't do it. Well, that's not really a service. That's a business deal. That's a guilt bargain. I did this for you, and now you owe me. You better pay up, sucker, because if not, I'm going to be on your case. I'm going to be mad at you. I'm going to come after you. You understand? So we want to get out of this mentality of owing this going out and owing this coming in. Now, let's say that somebody does something nice for you, and you really want to return the favor, but at the moment, you're not in a position to do it. Okay. Years ago, a friend of mine was a photographer. And she came over to my house, and she did a really good photo shoot of me for professional promotion. And I said, what do I owe you? She said, well, you're my friend, forget about it. And I kind of felt indebted to her. But she said, no, I'm happy to do it for you. Cool lady. And for several years, I felt, I'd like to do something for her. And then she signed up for one of my programs. And I said, well, guess what? I'd like to share that program with you for free because you did that favor for me. She said, really? I said, yeah. And so what happened was the universe created a situation where I could help her. So it went around, what goes around comes around. And I felt really good about it because she's helped me out of her generosity and I helped her out of my generosity. So even if you want to help somebody, but you can't, there's always going to be, it could take years, but it doesn't matter. There's always a way to return a favor out of love and gratitude, not out of guilt and owingness. So let all the people you think owe you something off the hook. And I promise you, you're going to get so free, you're going to wonder why you didn't do it years ago. Think of all the people who owe you favors or rides or gifts or massages or anything you ever did for somebody that you think now it has to come back. Let it go. Just let it go. I promise you, it'll come back 1,000-fold in wonderful, wonderful ways. Why? Because you're not walking around thinking, you owe me, you owe me, you owe me. No, get that out of your brain. That's pollution. That's toxic. Let other people off the hook, and God will let you off the hook. Now, I got to tell you, you're already off the hook. You were never on the hook. Only the ego mind, only the human mind, only the fear-based mind, only the gap-based mind puts us on the hook. There was never any hook. Hook is illusion. Hook is fiction. Hook is lie. Hook is a human story that people made up that has nothing to do with universal principles. So I'm hoping today that I'm giving you some tips and tools to just change your mind so you get that owingness mentality out of your brain. And now here's the final point I'll make. When you release yourself from a sense of owingness spiritually, in miraculous ways, your physical, financial indebtedness will clear off. I'm not going to tell you exactly how this happened because it's very unique. But as below, as above, so below, as within, so without. The world is your thoughts pushed out. So if you can, not if you, when you can, when you do, remove indebtedness from your consciousness, all the manifestations of indebtedness will disappear. And even if they don't, you won't care because you're not living in a debt mentality. There's people who have financial debts, but they don't feel indebted. There's big companies like airline companies, they have billions of dollars in debts, but money is moving around and their stockholders are making money and the debt is just on paper. They're not in a debt mentality. But I'm going to go even deeper and say that as you remove debts from your mentality, miraculously, synchronistically, amazingly, celebratorily, it's not a word I just made up, but get the debt out of your heart, get the debt out of your soul, get the debt out of your mind, and the world outside you must reflect your changed mind. That's the law of consciousness. What you see is what's going on out here. The world is a projection of consciousness. Change consciousness, and the world you see will change. Okay, I've given you a lot of nuggets. There's a lot in this lecture today. And even if you don't get it all, just take one little idea I said and make that work on your behalf, and you're going to be home free. That's another good title for this lecture, Home Free. You're already home, and you're already free. There you go. I just want to remind you that in 2 weeks, my new course, The Master Keys of Healing, is starting. It's an 8-week, very in-depth, intensive webinar series on how to be healed, how to give healing. Once again, it's kind of like that healing from the inside out. There'll be a lot of great principles. We'll do coaching on the air. So go to my website, alancohen.com. It's the Master Keys of Healing. And as a special treat, as part of this program, you receive a free PDF of my new book, The Master Keys of Healing. And once again, my dear friend Karen Drecker, who we know and love, will be giving a free song on healing as a part of each of the seminars. So go to my website, alancohen.com. The Master Keys of Healing starts, I believe, September 9th. It goes to November. Okay, love you guys a lot. This is a lot of juicy stuff today. I had a lot of fun sharing with you. I know the principles will work on your behalf as you apply them, and I'd love to hear good reports from you. Take care. Love you lots. We'll see you next week.